What is up, maniacs? I am Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 5 game-by-game breakdown. Very excited about this slate. I have no doubt this is the week we are taking down the Milly Maker. We're going to be millionaires at the end of the week. Zero doubt. This is a really fun slate. We've got a few very potent offenses against very bad defenses. I expect this to be a high-scoring week in DFS. And I'm really excited about how this slate is setting up. A lot of good vibes about what we're going to be able to achieve here. So let's just get it started and start with game 1, which is Baltimore versus Houston. In this game, not going to have a ton of this game. Pretty interesting, actually, when we look at our matchup grades. For Baltimore, it's looking real rough. Their offense has been pretty, especially last week, but it's been pretty banged up. Their offensive line has really struggled. You'll see the big discrepancy here with their pass blocking versus the pass rush for Houston. Looks like a really good spot for Houston defense. The receivers have some advantage against the coverage, but slight advantage on the run game. Really, the only thing I'm going to pull from Baltimore this week is I will mix in some Derrick Henry. With the likelihood of Lamar Jackson being out, I just think that they're going to try to lean on Derrick Henry and keep this a low-scoring game, which I think sets up for anytime Derrick Henry gets 25 touches, somewhere in that ballpark. I like that type of scenario for Henry. Let's go over here and check out pricing real quick. We'll pull up Baltimore first. So Cooper Rush at 4,300. Somewhat tempting, but I just don't see enough upside for it to be worth it. But Henry at 7K is doable. Wide receiver, Flowers is a little lower at 6,200. Really, I just don't want to touch anything here. Andrews and Likely, they're Likely actually out-snapped Andrews last week as far as routes run, I mean. So I'm pretty much Henry and Henry only on this game. Let's go to Houston. We'll go back to the spreadsheet and we'll look at the breakdown there. In the passing game, real disadvantage. Their O-line is just trash. But Baltimore's defense has a ton of injuries right now, and they actually have a very big advantage, one of the biggest advantages in the run game this week. So I will be mixing in some Woody Marks for sure. I will do a few CJ Stroud stacks, I think. So let's go over here and let's look. CJ Stroud at 5,200. Probably just skinny stack it with Nico's under 7K this week. So it's hard to not play Nico when he's under 7K. Only takes a couple plays, and Baltimore is just really beat up. So this is a week I can get to Nico with or without CJ Stroud. So I will mix in a little Nico. And Woody Marks at 5,400. He will be one of my core plays as well. Probably somewhere around 15% ownership would be my guess. Obviously, he looked really good last week, put up a 27.9. Kind of out of nowhere. I did see a clip of D'Amico Ryans talking over the headset saying, "We found our running back." So that's a pretty good indication to me they're ready to move on from Nick Chubb, and there's no sign of Joe Mixon coming back. So in this game, I will be mixing in Woody Marks quite a bit. He will be one of my core play running backs, and I will be mixing in Nico Collins quite a bit as well. He can go off any single week. We're looking for guys that can score 25 plus points. He's definitely a guy that can do that. Let's look at his stat line so far. He's had 1 week of that. Their O-line has just been so bad that it's been hard to get anything going, but we know we're getting a solid amount of targets here, and he does a lot of great work with those targets. Feels like a sneaky spot for him to go off. Baltimore sounds like, we expected Baltimore to have a good defense coming into the year, but that's just not the case. Especially with all the injuries they have. Not really going to mess with Schultz. 3,300, but I am interested in their defense at 2,400. I will be having a ton of Texans defense. Obviously, this was set before we knew Lamar is likely going to be out. Because of that, we are going to be playing a ton of Texans defense. With that pass rush versus that beat-up offensive line, just looks like a good spot for them to have a good chance of scoring touchdowns. one thing I wanted to do before we jump to the games, but I forgot to do so. Now that we're into week 5, it gives us a little bit more information to work with. So I just wanted to see, of the offenses that are playing in the main slate, who scored the most points. We got Detroit and Baltimore up here, actually. Detroit has a great matchup. Very looking forward to talking about that game. But we can see that who are these offenses that are repeatedly having good weeks. And this week, Detroit is the one that stands out the most, as well as Indianapolis. And we'll jump over here and look at who's given up the most points. That's what I wanted to show you. Baltimore has given up the most points of any team on this main slate. Dallas being second, New Orleans being third. The Jets and Tennessee tied for fourth with Cincinnati, and Miami with a very close 5th and 6th. These are the defenses we want to target, and there are some sweet matchups for that this week. So let's go back to our game by game. I think we got a pretty good feel for this game, the Baltimore and Houston game. Not going to have a ton of this game, but we will be mixing in some of Houston and a little bit of Derrick Henry. Now let's move on to the next game. This game is an interesting one. We have 2 decent offenses. Obviously, we'd say Miami is a better offense than Carolina, but we have 2 just putrid defenses. So this is intriguing. It's kind of a sneaky game to possibly be a shootout. We're actually seeing an advantage in the pass game across the board and in the run game for Carolina. Carolina's having the advantage all the way across the board on offense, both in the passing game and in the run game. Those stacks are super cheap to build as well. So Carolina is intriguing. I think obviously with Tyreek Hill's injury on the Miami side, I think their targets are going to be even more concentrated between Achane and Waddle. Might be able to mix in a little bit of Malik Washington and Darren Waller, maybe even some Westbrook Akine, but really it's just Waddle and Achane. We'll be pulling a decent amount of them out across our core player pool. And this Carolina stacks are sneaky as well. So let's go to that game. Let's look at Miami first. 2 at 5,500, definitely in play. He'll probably be in my like but don't love quarterbacks. Build somewhere between 5 to 8 lineups with him in our big player pool, or our big field tournament entries. Achane at 7,300 is just too cheap for the amount of volume he's going to get. I mean, we can see his floor so far has been 16-1. We'd expect him to be more towards the ceiling in this matchup against the Panthers, especially with no Tyreek Hill. So he's a smash spot. He will probably be chalky, but that is okay. Just looks like too good of a spot for him to avoid. Tyreek Hill, we know, is done for the year. Waddle at 5,400 is just too cheap. The pricing was done before the injury to Tyreek, so he is mispriced. He will be one of our core plays as well. Malik Washington and Westbrook Akine will both be some go-to punt plays for me. Yeah, maybe mix them into somewhere in the ballpark of. I'm more interested in Washington just because I think there's more big playability there. Seeing it with 3 targets. He's been on the field a decent amount. Let's see what Akine really hasn't been on the field much, fewer targets. I think that'll change a little bit. But yeah, so it's pretty much Waddle and Achane out of this, and also Waller at 3,500. Interesting that he's that high. Thought he would actually be lower than that. Still cheap, but interesting. Obviously, he turned 4 targets into 17.7 points. That'll happen when you get 2 TDs. I think he's one of the most likely candidates to get more work, though, because of Tyreek Hill being out. We're not touching either of these defenses. So Achane is the core play. We will build somewhere in the ballpark of 5 to 8 lineups with Tua. It's nice about this offense is that it is concentrated. So we're mixing in Achane and Waddle across our player pool, across all of our lineups. Then let's go to the Carolina side. I actually have just built a Bryce Young lineup. It's pretty attractive with how cheap he is. Obviously, We've had 3 really bad games, and his good fantasy game was actually a pretty bad real life game, but he put together a little run in the second half when they were down big against Arizona in week 2. I do think that there is likely to be some regression towards the positive for Bryce Young. Everybody's in the sky is falling mode right now. I'm probably going to build 5-ish lineups with Bryce Young this week. Tedero McMillan at 5,700 is too cheap. He hasn't had a big game yet, but the target volume is there. He's shown that skill set that we want to see in a number one receiver. He's made some amazing catches. He's seen some run after the catch ability as well. So I'm in on Tedero McMillan. Obviously, the fantasy stats aren't there yet, but he is going to have a big week, and there's a real good chance that it's this week. So we're going to attack Tedero McMillan. Chuba, let's check the Q tag, see if there's any news on that. Didn't participate in practice on Wednesday. We'll keep an eye on that, but I think it's a decent spot for him. We have seen a little bit of Dowdle mixed in, so it's less exciting, but at 5,800, he'll be mixed into my player pool. Definitely not a core play, but someone to keep an eye on. And we'll be interested in a few Bryce Young lineups as well. So primarily out of Carolina, Tedero McMillan will be one of my core plays. I have a few other core plays we'll talk about more that will be above him, but I want to get somewhere around 15 to 20% of him in my exposures. Moving on to Las Vegas and Indianapolis, we can see that Indy has a massive advantage across the board here. This looks like a smash spot for everybody on Indianapolis. Vegas's defense or offense has been struggling. I was heavy on them last week against the Bears, and obviously that did not play out well for us. Just wanted to see where some of their grades are at. Run blocking, they're horrific. Pass blocking, they're actually not too bad. But on defense, they're just putrid across the board. So we will be smashing Indianapolis this week. I will pretty much be avoiding Vegas. I'm going to play this primarily as Indianapolis wins handily, something around a 28-10 type win. So let's go ahead and look at that scenario. We'll look at Vegas first. Not really interested in anything here. Genty at 6,700, obviously coming off the big game. We liked that last week. Let's go back and look at Indianapolis's run D grades. So they're about middle of the pack across the board on defense. So it's nothing scary for Vegas. So we definitely want to mix in a little Genty. He's just too explosive. That O-line is so bad, but he is just so good. And I think that they realize that they need to get him the ball, that he's their most explosive player. And Geno's been really hot and cold. Good in week 1 and good in week 3. Awful in week 2 and awful in week 4. He leads the league in interceptions right now with 7. I'll build 2 or 3 Geno lineups, but I'm not a believer this week. But I'll mix in a couple just in case. Myers is all right, but I'm not there. Bowers seems like he's hurt. I'm going to avoid him at his price tag. There's just better options out there at better prices. So for Vegas, not doing much except a little Genty. Now let's get over to Indianapolis. We are going to smash this spot. Daniel Jones will be one of our core plays. I'll build about 15 lineups with him. He'll be one of my top 4 quarterbacks this week, without a doubt. He had a decent week last week. Obviously, it doesn't look like that from a fantasy standpoint, but looks a little different if Mitchell doesn't fumble going across the goal line. It's more of an average week for him. But against this defense, I just think he's going to be more in this 25-point range. At 5,800, that leaves us a lot of salary to work with. Jonathan Taylor, I think, is actually not going to be that highly owned because he's the highest priced running back. because of that, not because of that, just in general, I think he is a great play this week, but it's extra nice when he is going to be lower owned to play a lot of him against a bad defense. Like, everybody's going to see this opponent rank of 5th. This is just saying how many fantasy points they've given up to running backs. And a lot of that has a lot more to do with who they've played so far as running backs, and a lot less to do with their run defense. So I see Jonathan Taylor with another one of his big games. We see he's had 2 games in the 30s so far. So we'll take those games at 8K, no doubt. So he will be one of our core plays, going to try to get to 20, 25%. Jonathan Taylor, be a little bit harder to build those with him being at 8K, properly priced finally, but it's just a smash spot for him. Wide receiver, we're learning that Pittman is the go-to guy in this offense. I was really high on Josh Downs coming into the year and in best ball, but it just doesn't seem like he's getting the volume he needs to be a real stud. Getting decent targets, but nothing downfield, just kind of short yardage area stuff. So he really needs to score to be of value, and he's not really their red zone guy. I'll mix him in a little bit in some of these stacks, maybe 3 or 4 lineups, somewhere in that ballpark in my Daniel Jones lineups. But outside of that, I'm not going to use much of him. It sounds like Pierce is going to play this week. I'd be more interested in him than Downs this week. This Vegas defense is just not good. We've talked about that quite a bit. He's a guy that can, at any time, take the top off the defense and score a big touchdown. Pittman is the more reliable guy in this range, though. He hasn't had a huge boom game yet, 19, 20, but he's been solid, getting a lot of targets every week, and he's got in the end zone 3 out of 4 weeks. So he's definitely in play. Tyler Warren, all day, every day. He's going to be I had over 50% of him last week. He finished at tight end 2, just behind Goddard, who nobody had, and it was just 1 point behind Goddard. So really happy with that play. He's just good. He's a dog. He's going to be one of those guys that, makes plays after the catch. He can get open. They're going to use him at the goal line. He had 2 rushes at the goal line last week and scored a rushing touchdown. He's their tush-push guy. So I like Warren there. He will be one of my go-to tight ends for sure. I'm interested in their defense at 3,300, but I think there's actually some better spots this week. But against Geno, who's leading the league in interceptions, that's definitely intriguing. So we'll consider the Colts at defense in spots where we can spend that 3,300. The core guys, though, are going to be Jones, Taylor, Pittman, and Warren. Those are going to be the guys that we build the majority of our stacks and sprinkle across all of our lineups. Yeah, love Indy. They're one of my big smashes this week. I will probably have a Colts. There's 3 offenses this week that I will probably have in every single lineup, and the Colts are one of those. We'll get to the other ones here shortly. All right, let's move on to the next game. Our next game is New Orleans and the Giants. Kind of an interesting spot here. Now, I really like the Giants defense. Look at this pass rush grade. I think that's the highest pass rush grade of anybody on the slate. Not quite. They're behind Philly and Houston, but that is a pretty good indicator of defensive success, and they're pretty cheap. I think they're at 2,800 if I remember correctly. So definitely interested in that. We'll go look at pricing here in a second. Obviously, the Giants lose Malik Neighbors. That is a huge loss for them. Jackson Dart was exciting, and they won, but he didn't really grade very well. He did a lot of exciting stuff, and he did some things fantasy-wise that are good, like he's run the ball, he's aggressive with his scrambling. I don't know that that's great for his longevity for NFL football, but it's exciting for fantasy football. We'll go in and let's look at their pricing here. Dart's at 5,300. I'll probably build 2 Dart lineups, and that's about it. The person that I'm most intrigued in this game is Scatterboo. Obviously, he is getting a lot of volume now. I got 25 attempts last week against a pretty solid Chargers defense. I made the most of them. You watch that game, he just doesn't go down early. Like, he's always going to fall forward for 2 or 3 yards. He's very good at finding that open space, seems to have really good vision, really good contact balance. I think he is the real deal. I think he's just a good NFL running back. Would have liked to keep him around that 5,500 number a little longer, but this matchup against New Orleans is pretty attractive. Let's go look at the run numbers again real quick. Actually, showing a negative in run blocking versus run D. Let's go see if that's bad on bad or if that's good on good. Let's see here. So Giants, New Orleans run D, they're about middle of the pack. Their run block for the Giants, it's about, bottom middle at 54. So it's about average on average, honestly. But I think that the run grade here is pretty high, and I think that's just going to get better with Scatterboo being the main guy. I do think he's just a good runner. So he will be in our running back pool for sure. Now, people are going to be interested in wide receivers. 5,300 though for Wan'Dale. Like, obviously he had the big game with Russ in week 2 against the Cowboys. I don't think this is as good of a matchup for him. We do expect him to get more volume now that Malik is unfortunately done for the year. I still just don't see it, though. At this price, I think I will primarily be avoiding these guys. Slayton, I think, has more like big playability. He's more of like a straight line runner, deep ball type guy. Obviously, he will be getting more volume now than he has been getting. He's made a few plays, but really need him to score to do anything to be worth it. 4,300 is more intriguing to me than Robinson. So Slayton, I might sprinkle into lineups outside of my couple dart lineups, but probably not much, just a little bit. Theo Johnson, I'm pretty much out on. He's on the field, he's getting some targets, but he's not really doing much with them. I just think there's better tight end spots this week, so I'm not going to play much of that. Their defense, though, at 2,900, anytime I can get to the Giants D this week, I will be getting to that Giants D. I think their secondary has not been good. That was one of my theories going into last week where I was heavy on the Chargers. Let's go look at their coverage grade here. 59.4. It's actually kind of middle of the pack. It's not good, but it's more middle of the pack than I thought it was going to be. But this pass rush grade is pretty elite, and I think that they've had some pretty tough matchups early in the year. I think that will only get better, especially as Abdul Carter's getting his feet under him as a rookie. I think they will just continue to get better in that. And they're playing Spencer Rattler and New Orleans. So I am going to try to get as many Giants lineups as I can on defense. It's interesting, too, because obviously I consume a lot of fantasy football content, and all the podcasts I've been listening to throughout the last couple days, I've heard multiple people say the Giants D isn't good, and I just don't see that. Like, their coverage isn't great, but I guess their tackling hasn't been great either. They haven't been great run defense, but that pass rush is just so good from a fantasy football standpoint. Like, that is the biggest indicator for scoring fantasy points. You rush the quarterback, you put pressure on them, makes them more likely to make rush decisions, which leads to turnovers. And then obviously we get points for sacks and sack fumbles. Just feels like against Rattler this week that they are going to get some turnovers. I'm in on that. Give me that all day long. Here's an interesting thing. We see that the Saints are one of the lowest graded tacklers on the week. Let's see if they actually are the lowest. They are the lowest graded tackling team. The Jets are there too. Interesting. We'll get to that game. Very excited about that game. So to me, that gives me more confidence in Scatterboo. So primarily out of this game, Scatterboo and Giants D. I've got a pretty solid philosophy of just not playing Saints, and that has not hurt me much this year. Kendre Miller at 4,400 is kind of intriguing. I think he's going to get more and more run. I think there's a decent chance that Kamara gets traded. I think they have a much bigger advantage in the run game than they do in the pass game here. So maybe mix in 3 or 4 lineups with Miller. I'm not going to play with Rattler. I'm out on these receivers. I think they're good receivers. It's just that they don't score enough. They're good NFL receivers. They're not good fantasy football receivers. This is great if you're in redraft. Olave is a good redraft pick. He moves it along week to week. He's got a good floor. But we are trying to win $1 million. Chris Olave is not the guy that's going to do that for us. Famous last words as he's, goes off for a big game this week. But again, the Giants have played some really good passing offenses. So this 31st rank, I think, is skewed. They played the Cowboys, who had a massive game. They played the Chargers, who have a really good pass offense and had some pretty good fantasy scores last week in that game. I forget who they played week 1, but those 2 games alone are going to put up enough fantasy points that it's going to pull them down towards the bottom. So I don't really believe in that 31st rank. I think that's slightly skewed because of matchups. Juwan Johnson, somewhat intriguing at 3,900, but we'll see that there's better options. Their defense is a interesting punt. We're playing a rookie quarterback without many weapons besides his rookie running back. So that is somewhat intriguing. In situations where I have to punt, they will probably be my go-to punt defense when I can't get to the 2,400 that Houston's at. If I can only get to 22, I'll mix them in a little bit. I don't want to play much of that. We saw the tackling grade, so we don't want to be all over that. But we'll mix it in a little bit when we have to. It's definitely possible that a rookie quarterback in Jackson Dart, who played, honestly, what to me felt like a little too fast last week. It was exciting. It was fun to watch, but it was chaotic. Lots of times, chaotic can lead to turnovers. So because of that, we'll mix in New Orleans defense a little bit, but besides that, we're pretty much avoiding the Saints. Now, let's get to a fun game. Let's get to a game that is just sexy. This game is going to be fun. Give me Cowboys. Give me all of the Cowboys. Yes, we see this big disadvantage at pass block versus pass rush. I think that's the biggest one of the week. Yeah, it is. No. Cincinnati's against Detroit is worse. But yeah, this is one of the biggest disadvantages of the week. But let's go back to week 4's. Let's see. Let's go back to week 4 and see what that matchup looked like for Dallas last week. They're the Sunday night game. Dallas is row 7. I don't use this one much because I don't play showdowns. Yeah, last week they were showing a -40 pass block versus pass rush grade, and they scored 40 points, and Dak was awesome. Basically, what's happening is Dak is playing at an MVP level, and against the Jets, I expect that to continue. So that doesn't scare me because last week the matchup stats weren't looking great. It was actually looking pretty rough against the very good Packers defense. I mean, Micah Parsons had a 92.5 pass rush grade or overall grade last week by PFF, which is ultra elite. And it didn't really feel like he dominated that game, but he was dominating almost every single play. But Dak was making quick decisions and avoiding the rush despite that. So I expect more of the same, where this week, look at this advantage against the Jets. 48 on the pass versus their coverage, and 33 with their receivers versus coverage. The Jets' coverage has been atrocious this year. Let's look at their tackle. We already know is low. Their coverage is towards the bottom of the slate as well at 42.4. And they don't have a great pass rush either. This is middle of the road to lower half at 66.9 for their pass rush. What's interesting is just how bad Dallas's pass rush has been. Their pass rush has a 34 grade, which is, I believe, the lowest. Let's see if that is the lowest by quite a chunk. And that actually, I looked at it earlier as well. Their pass block grade coming into the week was at 40. And then when they played the Packers and Micah Parsons, it went down another 6 points. So I think in this matchup, we're going to see that start regressing towards the mean a little bit. So I think that's kind of skewed. They also played the Giants the week before, and we just saw how good of a pass rush that the Giants have. And I think that pass rush for the Giants is just going to continue to get better. But that's besides the point for Dallas this week. So I think this shows a big disadvantage, but I think that it is kind of skewed. I think this is going to be their best matchup they've had so far as pass block versus pass rush, and we'll see that grade kind of level out. But everything else just looks so good. Another interesting thing is Dallas's offensive line has been pretty damn solid in run blocking. Look at it, 73.1 on run block. Go the other way with it, sorry. Yeah, actually the best run blocking team that's included in this main slate this week. So, what does all of this mean? It means that we want Cowboys this week. Javonte Williams, we want Dak Prescott, we want George Pickens, we want Jake Ferguson. We want Cowboys. I will have a Cowboy in every single lineup. Let's look at the Cowboys here. God, I'm pumped for this. This week is awesome. We have 3 super good offenses against really bad defenses. And I don't think people realize like how big of a disadvantage there really is between these offenses. Like the Jets coming into the year, and last year they had a decent defense, but coming into the year we expected them to have a good defense with Aaron Glenn coming in and basically the same defense that they had 2 years ago that was really solid. For the most part, they have like a lot of that personnel returning, but they've been trash. They have not been a good defense. If we go back over here, I think that they were one of the highest teams as far as points given up. Yeah, tied for 4th in points given up so far this year. They have not been a good defense, and they haven't played like anybody too crazy. Like they played the Dolphins, they played the Steelers. Let's go back and look at who they played. Let's go to the Jet side of this. Oh yeah, they played Buffalo as well. So Buffalo obviously is a good offense. Who else am I missing? He didn't play in week 3, so that's not giving us all of it. Tampa Bay. So they didn't play, like Tampa Bay's obviously a solid offense, but they haven't played anybody incredible yet. So besides Buffalo is top tier. But I just don't think they are a good defense. This sets up really well, but I think the market in a lot of ways thinks that the Jets defense is good. I think what's going to happen is a lot of people believe that Dallas's defense is bad, and they're right on that. So I think a lot of people are going to be on the Jets. We're going to be on the Jets too, but pretty much just 2 players. We'll walk through that here in a second. But a quarterback, Dak at 6,000, way too cheap for this spot and the way he's played. Interesting too, like his fantasy points haven't been that great, but he is playing really good quarterback, and the fantasy points will follow. We saw that last week, and we saw it in week 2. Week 1, if CD doesn't drop a few of those passes, that number looks a lot different. Yeah, so we like Dak. Dak is going to be one of our core plays. We will build about 15 lineups with Dak. Javonte at 6,200. He will be one of our core plays. I'm guessing I'll be closer to 30% owned on Javonte. Javonte's looked really good too. It's not just that he is like the dude that they have, and kind of like Rico Dowdle last year, where I didn't really think Rico Dowdle was good, but he just was getting the volume. Javonte's looked good. He's looked like he did when he was a rookie. I looked a little bit more explosive, running downhill, no hesitation. He seems very comfortable in that offense. He's on the field a ton. Look at these finishes, 20, 25, 13 as a floor, and 19 points last week in a pretty tough matchup. This is a much better matchup for him this week, so heavy on Javonte this week. Pickens at 6,600. Would like to see that a little lower, but he's still going to be the go-to guy. I'll have to do a little bit more research on how much man the Jets play. Obviously, he'd be matched up against Sauce Gardner if they're playing man, but Pickens is just so good against man, and he's not great against zone. So I'll have to dig in a little bit to see how much man versus zone the Jets are playing. If they're playing a lot of man, then I'll be even heavier on Pickens. Tolbert and Turpin both are pretty sneaky punt plays, especially if Pickens is going to get a lot of the Sauce Gardner attention. I don't think Sauce is as good as people believe he is. I mean, he got paid. Like, he's a good player, but he's not like Darrelle Revis was back in the day. He's not a shutdown guy where you can just take away one player on the other team. It's just not like that. But Tolbert last week got 6 targets, obviously in a shootout game, 10.1 fantasy points. Really need him to get in if he gets in the end zone. I mean, at 3,300, 10 points doesn't kill us. If he gets in the end zone there, then that's like a huge win. Turpin, it hasn't done much yet, but here's a game where he gets in the end zone. So 3,500, it's kind of intriguing. So in some of our stacks, we'll mix in Tolbert and Turpin, primarily going to be focused on Pickens and Ferguson as far as pass catchers go. Let's look at Ferguson. Ferguson's been dominant for a tight end. Yeah, he'll be one of our go-to plays. I think he's at 4,800, so it's still way too cheap, especially for this matchup. So I'll have plenty of Dak plus Ferguson stacks. One thing I think I learned from last week, I think I've been over stacking a little bit with my QBs. I need to do some more skinny stacks where it's just QB plus 1. So I'm going to make sure that I have multiple lineups with Dak and Ferguson, and then 3 or 4 of those lineups, and then 3 or 4 lineups with Dak plus Pickens. And then I'll have, my onslaughts and my double stacks and things along those lines. But those are the solo stacks that I want to build. We'll have a ton of them. Not playing the defense at 2,900. The defense is trash. They're the Bengals of this year. They're the 2024 Bengals, where their offense is, I think by when CeeDee Lamb comes back, that their offense is Super Bowl caliber. Like, they're that good of an offense. But defensively, they're absolute trash. I think they're going to be in the mix for a playoff spot. Not that matters for DFS. But I just think from a fantasy standpoint, they're going to be in a lot of shootouts, which is really great for DFS. They're an offense that we're going to target week in and week out. This week just happens to be a really nice spot for them. So get your Cowboys in your lineups. This is a smash spot. Now let's look at the Jets. The Jets are grading a lot better on offense than it looks. It's interesting to me that they are grading so well. They're about middle of the pack in all of their passing game and about middle of the pack in their run game as well. Breece Hall looked a little off to me in the game the other night. I heard he got banged up on like the second or third play, so it didn't look like he was nearly as explosive as he looked in the earlier weeks. So we'll keep an eye on that, see if anything pops up on the injury report. Let's see if there's anything that is showing. No, nothing there. Breece Hall's burned us a few times this year. The one big thing that is happening this week, though, is Braylon Allen is out. So Breece Hall isn't going to have to worry about getting sniped at the goal line. So I really like him in the spot at 5,600. He's definitely going to be one of my core plays. Him and Wilson at their price. The offense is running through them. The offense goes to them. Even though I don't think Justin Fields has played great, he's put up some good fantasy performances, which is the beautiful thing about Justin Fields. He'll be in consideration for me. Actually, in cash, I think he's going to be kind of chalky, so I might play that. I'll probably play 5 to 8 Justin Fields lineups, maybe a little more. Now I'm talking myself into it a little bit. He burned me in week 2. The only week I was heavy on Justin Fields was week 2, so maybe I'm just being a little soft there. Obviously, he's elite in the rushing game. Gives us a nice floor, so I like him a lot in cash. Against Dallas, it's intriguing. But really, it's the nice thing about the Jets is it's Breece Hall, it's Garrett Wilson, it's Justin Fields, and that's pretty much it. I'm not going to build anything with Reynolds or Lazard. I might mix in a little bit of Mason Taylor, maybe in a couple of my lineups. He got more targets last week. Let's check this Q tag. Yeah, he's good. He'll be fine. If he's practicing limited, I mean, he had the high ankle sprain early in training camp, so I think he's just getting healthier and healthier from that. So I'll build around 8 Justin Fields lineups, but Hall and Wilson, I will be pretty heavy on at these price points. It's just that is their offense. And I don't see a scenario in which they score less than 3 offensive touchdowns. I mean, I guess it's possible they just score 2, but against Dallas, you'd expect them to score 2 to 3 offensive touchdowns, at least be moving the ball a decent amount. Yeah, let's go after that. I think the field is going to be pretty heavy on the Jets. I don't think they're going to be as heavy as they should be on Dallas. Like, they'll be heavy on Dallas, but not nearly as heavy as they should be. We will be above weight on Dallas. We'll probably be about on par with the field with the Jets. But really, it's Hall and Wilson, and we'll mix in a little Fields as well. That game I'm excited for. I'm not going to play I'll play some game stacks, but like on the Jets side, when I play the Fields lineups, I will definitely have Cowboys as comebacks on that. One of the things that, looking at the past few weeks, I think I've been a little too heavy on game stacks and not just heavy on like the offenses that I love. Like the offenses that I love this week are Dallas, Indianapolis, and the Chargers. So I want to be heavier on them and I don't necessarily need game correlation comebacks in that game. Against Dallas, there's probably one guy that probably Hall or Wilson. You would expect at least one of them to be top 10 this week. From the main slate, at least, not necessarily for the whole week, but for the top 10 in the main slate. So we can't ignore that. We need to mix that in. There's obviously upside for both guys to be top 5, which is really what we're looking for when we're playing in the Milly Maker, trying to take down that Milly. So we do need to mix in the Jets, but I really like the Dallas side of this. I love Javonte and I love Ferguson. Those are the two that I like the most out of there. And I like Dak as well. All right, let's move on to our next game. This next one's kind of confusing. Not real sure what to do with it. In Philadelphia and Denver. Denver has the best pass blocking team in the league, in the pass blocking grade. They're actually at an 81, but we can see that Philly has one of the best pass rushes in the league. So they actually are at a disadvantage this week. Bo Nix hasn't played great. He's putting up decent fantasy numbers, which is obviously all we care about. But we need that offense to run, like to be moving. It's at 5,700. This game, like if I were to say the total's at 43.5, I'd probably take the under on that, honestly. Like, I think this game's going to move kind of slow. There is possibility for Saquon to have that big game out of nowhere. He hasn't been, like, they have a big disadvantage in the run game, a little bit of advantage in the pass game and receiving game, but a disadvantage pass block versus pass rush. So yeah, Denver in the passing game is just negative across the board. I will probably build 2 Bo Nix lineups is basically where I'm at. I'll build 2 Bo plus Sutton and call it good. Philly's D is really good. Philly's offense has been good when it's needed to be, but it just feels like they're not being very creative. Pretty ugly, honestly. Hurts at 6,800. I'll probably build somewhere around 4 to 5 Hurts lineups primarily. I'll build a couple naked and then a couple single stacks with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Barkley at 7,500 is going to be kind of hard to get to. It's in Philly. He just hasn't busted a big one yet. I think that's coming. Their offensive line has been pretty banged up. Lane Johnson's been on and off the field. Dickerson's got a back injury. He's been on and off the field as well. So this isn't a game that when initially looking at it that I'm very interested in. The Eagles are priced high. It's not a good matchup. Receivers are somewhat cheap. Goddard was wide receiver 1 or tight end 1 last week, but kind of a fluky tight end 1, only had 4 targets and only had 37 yards, but got 2 TDs. He's been solid when he plays this year. So actually definitely want to build Hurts to Goddard stacks when we do those. For most part, I'm going to be out on this game. I'm not really going to sprinkle in anybody from this game in other lineups. I will build a few lineups with these quarterbacks and sprinkle in those guys. Saquon is hard for me because it's like he's had big games against good, or what we would say bad matchups for him against good defenses in the past. So we don't want to completely ignore him. I think the field's going to be off him quite a bit, so we could get leverage on the field by playing him. I'll probably play him, let's say, somewhere in the ballpark of 5 lineups, about 5 to 8% of my lineups. I tend to build around 100 lineups. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll mix him in a little bit, but I just think there's better options. I don't want to completely fade him because any week he can go off. He's looked good to me. Like, he's looked just as explosive as he did last year. It's just that offensive line has not been as elite as they were last year. Let's go over the Broncos side. Knicks at 5,700. I'm just not seeing it. I'll build 2 lineups, but only 2 lineups, and I will just stack him with Sutton, 6K. It's not a great matchup there either. Philadelphia's secondary has been pretty solid. We can see here that, Philadelphia has the advantage across the board there. And I really don't want to mess with these running backs either because they are splitting time. Harvey's somewhat more interesting at 4,500, but they're splitting so much time. They're playing an elite defensive line. I think I'm out. I'm out on Ingram. Yep, I'll play 2 Knicks to Sutton stacks, and that's all I will do at Denver this week. Philly, I primarily will just, build the 5 Hurts lineups. The things about Hurts is, like, you can have him be skinny stacked or naked, and he can always get 2 tush-push touchdowns and put up that 20 spot. Like, even though he really hasn't done anything through the passing game yet, look at these finishes. 30, this was like the only week he threw the ball and he only had 226 yards. Look at these passing yards. So he doesn't necessarily bring anybody along with him, but over here you've got your rushing yards, but you got your TDs. We got 4 rushing TDs over here. So that's where Jalen Hurts is unique. We can build some naked Hurts stacks. He can have a game that doesn't feel like he dominated, but he puts up solid fantasy points because of the tush push. So we'll mix him in every single week. Not a great spot, it looks like. I think this is going to be one of those games that, like I said, I would take the under on it right now. I think it's going to be kind of an ugly game. I think both teams are going to try to slow the game down a little bit and stay in it. It's in Philly. Yeah, I just don't see this game as being a game that's going to have a lot of fantasy points come out of it. All right, next game we got is Tennessee at Arizona. Really, Tennessee, we're not going to do anything with Tennessee. That's pretty much where we're at week in and week out. We're not going to take any pieces from Tennessee, so we don't need to spend much time on them. Arizona's defense we'll consider. We'll look at that here in a second. I will build some Kyler stacks. He's easy to stack because it's just basically either solo with McBride or solo with Harrison. They've got a slight advantage against Tennessee, but this is pretty much a bad-on-bad type environment. It is at home, though, so I like Kyler to have a better chance of having that blow-up game kind of out of nowhere. I'll build 5 to 8 lineups with Kyler and pretty much just single stack with McBride or Harrison in those. I'm not going to touch Benson this week. Well, I guess let's look at his pricing first before we get too excited about that. Before we overspeak. Murray at 5,900. Definitely want him in play. 5 to 8 lineups with Murray. Benson, what? Saying IR. Wow. Did not know that. Well, we are definitely not playing Benson now. That actually makes Murray more intriguing to me. I'm not going to go after DeMarcado, sorry. Man, maybe at 4,700, though, against Tennessee. Very interesting. He's the more of their passing down guy. Huh. Did not know Benson was even injured. That changes things. I definitely will be a little heavier on Murray. Looks like he will be more in a situation where I'll have to carry them a bit more. Huh. We'll mix it in. As the week goes on, we'll learn more about DeMarcado and what their plans are. Michael Carter will probably mix in. I doubt that they would just go to him and have him be the bell cow. My guess is they'll split it up between probably Michael Carter and him. So it's still not that intriguing to me, even though they're super cheap. I feel like the field will probably jump to that against Tennessee. I'm going to jump more towards Kyler, though. Kyler, Harrison, and McBride. So I probably won't mix in too much of them outside of my Kyler stacks. I just think there are better places to get to this week. But this is kind of a sneaky spot with Kyler. I might bump Kyler up to like 10 lineups, actually. And Harrison at 5,400, he'll be in play for me. Obviously, he's been struggling. Him and Kyler don't seem to really have a connection. But they're going to have to make adjustments with basically no running game. They're going to have to rely on them more. This is a good get-right spot against Tennessee. Let's go look at Tennessee's defensive grades. They've been pretty awful. Let's go down here. Coverage, actually not too bad. Pass rush, not too bad. They've actually graded decent across the board on defense. So I guess I am not giving them as much credit as I should. It's pretty heavy on them last week against Houston. That didn't quite play out as we would have liked. Yeah, this looks like Arizona. I like Arizona being around this number, the 25.5 team implied total. I really thought Tennessee's stats on defense would be a little bit worse, but pretty middle of the road across the board. So at home, Kyler has those random spike games each year. He has 2 or 3 where he just goes off, runs around, makes some big plays. I could see that being a week like this. Don't like their run grade matchup here at all, especially without anybody there. So play a little bit of Arizona's D. Let's look at Arizona's D. They're too expensive at 3,600. Probably won't get to that at all. There's better spots. Okay. I think we've talked enough through that game. A little interest in Marvin Harrison at 5,400. I do think he could have a boom game. Matchup's not as great as I initially thought. But without a running game, they're going to have to put volume into McBride and to Harrison to create offense. I think that bodes well for all three of those guys, and Murray, Harrison, and McBride. So I'll definitely build some stacks with those guys. All right, let's move on to our next game. A little bit more intriguing game here in Seattle and Tampa Bay, 2, 3, and 1 teams. Seattle's defense has been pretty solid, only giving up 67 points this year. Tampa Bay and Baker Mayfield are fun every single week. They're actually showing a big disadvantage across the board on offense this week. I will be much lighter on them this week. I'll probably build 2 to 3 Baker lineups, but that's it. Most weeks I'm going to be 5 to 8 with Baker no matter what. Egbuka at 6,900 is intriguing. Let's see if we've got any updates on Bucky yet. He went in for an MRI today. He's in a walking boot right now, so we don't love that. Rashad White at 4,700. Definitely like him better than DeMarcado if Irving doesn't play, but Seattle's not a good matchup. It's not a good matchup. That O-line for Tampa Bay is pretty banged up, even though they did get Wirfs back. Obviously, Godwin's too expensive at 5,900. Like Buka, honestly, is too expensive. I mean, he's been great, but at 6,900, it's less intriguing. This could be an interesting game. See, Otten really hasn't done much. Yeah, even with Evans out last week, not much at all. I think I'll build 2 or 3 Baker lineups, even though the matchups are bad. I never want to count Baker out completely. He's always capable of throwing for 303. Plus, it's just fun to be rooting for him, especially in the afternoon games if I have lineup with that went off in the morning, and I have a Baker stack. It would be fun to have a Baker and Igbuka game stack that I'm just screaming at the TV for to take down the Millie. That would be fun. So we're not going to fade that completely, but I don't love this spot. This feels like a good spot for Seattle. 2,800, I don't love the defensive matchup either. Seattle's been pretty solid on offense. Sam Darnold's been pretty damn good. Let's quickly look at Seattle's defensive grades. Ooh, not great tackling. That's interesting. But everywhere else, run defense, very good. Pass rush, pretty solid. Coverage, pretty good. Middle to higher end there. So, and really big special team advantage there. So, Tampa's played much better on defense this year. Run defense, definitely towards the top. Tackling, towards the top as well. Pass rush, about middle of the road. Coverage, more towards the top for sure, which is interesting because last year they were just awful in coverage, but Winfield's been playing really well. So I will probably build 5 or so Darnold stacks and pretty much just do it with JSN, maybe mix in a little Horton. Kupp, I think Kupp is a much better NFL player at this point than he is a fantasy player. 4,600, he's somewhat intriguing. Like he's going to get, I think, somewhere in the 4 to 5 target range pretty much every week, but it's going to be intermediate stuff. It's going to be this 30, 50-yard range. So it's not going to do anything for us in fantasy. He had a decent week in week 2 against Pittsburgh, but like that's not one of us a Milly Maker either. So we'll fade Kupp for the most part. Horton, he's got more upside at 3,600 to me. He had the big week in week 3 at 3,600. 18 points could help us win a Milly Maker, primarily with Darnold, especially at 5,100. That's kind of crazy. He's that cheap. Would expect him to be closer to 55, 5,600, somewhere in there. He's been solid. He hasn't had a boom game yet. He had plenty of boom games last year. Probably not going to have nearly as many boom games as he had last year with Minnesota, just because, a little bit different setup. Obviously, JSN is very good. He's not quite Justin Jefferson-esque, but he's damn good. JSN is very good. So I think he'll have some weeks that he's in the mid-20s for sure. And it might be this week. So we'll play a few. It's hard to get to Walker or Charbonnet, especially with Walker being at 6,300. Everybody talks about like Kenneth Walker's tackle breaking ability, and he has it. Like he has great tackle breaking ability. He's got that big play ability. So we don't want to fade that completely, and we'll mix him in here and there. But with the split he's getting now, and the other thing I wanted to say there is he has that tackle breaking ability, but to me it feels like he doesn't have good vision. He's kind of like somewhat DeAndre Swift-ish to me, where to me the reason the coaches are playing Charbonnet is because they know Charbonnet is going to do what the play calls for, where with Kenneth Walker, they know that they can't necessarily count on that every single time he touches the ball. He's going to try to break a big one or miss the hole that it's designed to go in a lot more than Charbonnet is. Charbonnet is a much less explosive player, but I think he's more consistent. To me, that's why the timeshare is occurring, because the coaches feel more confident in Charbonnet doing what he's supposed to, where Walker gives them that more of that home run upside. So we'll mix in Walker a little bit across all of our lineups, but not a ton. With Vita Vea in there in the middle, Tampa Bay defense, it's not a great matchup. And with them splitting carries at 19 attempts last week, Charbonnet had 12. If I knew Walker was going to get 19 this week, I'd mix him in more. I think it's probably closer to 12 to 15 is kind of going to be like the more likely outcome. Let's look at Tampa Bay's run defense grade. Yeah, I think that's actually the best run defense grade of this slate. So yeah, I don't love it there for Walker. We'll mix him in a little bit. Primarily out of this game, we'll do some Darnold. JSN at 7,100 is intriguing. It's a little bit harder to get to at 7,100. Liked him better when he was in the mid sixes, but he's an elite receiver now. There's no doubt about it. He is an elite receiver. He is their go-to guy, and he's winning good on good. He's making contested catches. He's a guy you can count on. So JSN will be in our player pool every week as long as he stays reasonable around the 7K number. All right, let's move on to the next game. This game I am super pumped for. Give me Detroit. Give me that 30-point team implied total. Look at these matchup grades. A massive advantage across the board except for pass block versus pass rush, but that's pretty neutral, honestly. But huge advantage to receivers, huge advantage in the run game. Just advantage at every spot on offense. They play Cincy. Cincy is trash. Cincy's grades on offense are bad. I want to get to as much Detroit as I can and as much Detroit defense as I can, actually. Let's go look at the pricing here. 3,500. We will try to get there quite a bit. Cincinnati obviously has incredible weapons in T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase at 7,800, like, maybe I'll mix him in a little bit, but that's pretty much impossible to get to. Doesn't make sense to get to it. Like, that offensive line is atrocious. It is so bad. Joe Burrow puts an insane Band-Aid on it. It's very similar to what Dak is doing right now with Dallas. Like, their pass blocking has been trash, as we saw, but he is playing elite quarterback, allowing that offense to work. But when you go from a Joe Burrow to a Jake Browning and you have a 45 pass block grade and a 35 run block grade, it's not going to work. Like, how can you have an offense work like that? You're not going to get anything happening on the grounds. And then you're going to be going against a defense that has their ears pinned back, going at the quarterback against a team that is just awful at pass blocking. I don't see it. Like, yes, Jamar Chase could he could catch a slant and break 2 or 3 tackles and take it to the house. Like, he is that dude. He can do that. There's no doubt about that. But at 7,800, like, he literally has to score around 40 points for him to be a guy that you needed to have. I'm not going to play him. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to play any Bengals. That's a crazy thing to say. Crazy thing to say coming into the year where you had the 101 pick in Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, all those guys going in the top 4 rounds. And now they're unplayable. It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy that's the outcome. But that's where I'm at. I'm not going to play the Bengals. I've decided I am not playing Bengals this week. I'm going to play as much Detroit's defense as I can. It's going to be a little bit harder to get to. Jeez. With their price at 3,500. But look at how big this disadvantage is on the run game. Like, they are just getting destroyed there. Getting destroyed on the pass block. Man, even in coverage, receiver versus coverage, they barely have an advantage, and that's T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Like, this is just an awful spot for Jake Browning. Give me as much Detroit defense as I can, and I think this has a very good chance of being like the Detroit-Jacksonville game was last year. Let me pull this up for you guys. I think that was week 3. Let's look at the 2024 correlation charting. Pretty sure it's week 3. Maybe it's week 4. Let's see. We'll find it here. Get warmer. Okay, so it wasn't early in the season. Let's find it. Here it is. I think this is it. Yep, Lions-Jags. So they won this game. I'm pretty sure the final score was 52-3. But let's look at this. Jared Goff, QB1. David Montgomery, running back 4. Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver 1. Jamison Williams, wide receiver 8. And Jahmyr Gibbs, running back 9. That is 5 players that were top 10 at their position in that week. I think we could have a outcome like that this week. And another nice thing about Detroit is like they lay it on. They do not slow down. They will run up the score. Give me that all day. The only thing that is a slight negative in this is that it's an away game. It's in Cincinnati. They're not playing in the dome, but still, like these matchup stats against a horrific defense with an offense that can't move the ball at all. This is a smash spot for Detroit. So let's look at their pricing. Goff at 6,500. See where he's positioned. So really, he's your third highest price QB that's going to play this week. But to me, that's appropriately priced. Running back Gibbs is RB2. I'm going to try to build some Taylor and Gibbs lineups. I think that will be contrarian. I don't think Taylor will be as highly owned as he should be. And Gibbs, just give me Gibbs all day. Let's go in and look at the rest of the guys here. Montgomery at 5,200. This could definitely be a Montgomery game. I already had a 32.4, so we will mix in some Montgomery. Wide receiver. We'll mix in. People aren't going to play Amon-Ra St. Brown because he's the most expensive wide receiver, but I will be playing a lot of him with Jared Goff, and I will try to mix him in as much as possible. Normally, I try to avoid that price tag that's really high just because it's uncommon for a guy to have a big enough week and be wide receiver 1 at this price point and not bring along his quarterback. So because of that, I primarily only play these expensive guys with a quarterback. But this week might be a bit of an outlier for me where I might go against that a little bit. But here's the thing that's crazy to me. JMO's only 4,900. JMO's only 4,900. I'm having some crazy thoughts about playing JMO in 100% of my lineups. Now, when we look at his fantasy scoring so far, that looks like insanity. But I am called the Milly Maker Maniac for a reason because I'm a bit of a maniac. And these stats look a lot worse than they actually are. He dropped what would have been like a 50-yard pass last week. It was kind of a tough catch because it was thrown to the opposite way he turned, so he had to turn around midair while the ball was in the air and didn't come down with it. But his ADOT right now is above 20 yards. Yeah, I think it was something like over 200 yards or over 200 air yards last year on his targets. Last week, on his targets. Like they're trying to get him big shots. And Cleveland's D is much, much better than Cincinnati's defense. At 4,900? Like you're telling me, like at 4,900, he doesn't have to get a TD. He just has to get 100 yards. And I think like that, to me, it's a more likely outcome this week that Jameson Williams has 100 yards receiving than he doesn't have 100 yards receiving. It's going to be hard for me to not have him in at least 75% of my lineups. Like this just feels extremely mispriced to me. I know I'm probably going to be in the minority. I'm believing that, but that's okay. I feel very confident in it. We'll see if I have to eat my words in the recap next week. But I'm going to be very high on JMO. Just, it's too good of a price. Laporta at 4,200. We'll mix him in as well. I do want to go through. Let's look at the 2024 correlation charting. This is really where Goff got hot last year. And one thing I want to point out is like there were a lot of different combos with Jared Goff. So let's see, week 14. Yeah, week 14, he had a pretty good week. This was kind of a weird week. It was him, Tim Patrick, and Sam Laporta. That wasn't a great week, but week 15, it picks up. QB2, Gibbs, RB2, Amon-Ra, wide receiver 2, Laporta, tight end 3. So like that's one of those onslaught scenarios. We'll build plenty of these. Like that's a stack that I will definitely build. Week 16, he was QB3. JMO was wide receiver 4. Gibbs was running back 7. Laporta was tight end 6. Yeah, so those were some big weeks that we can build off of. Really, it's Laporta, it's JMO, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. It's Gibbs, a little bit of Montgomery even. Like feels like a Montgomery game for sure. And Jared Goff. I will have a Lion in every single lineup. No doubt. Every single lineup, I will have a Lion in it. You cannot tell me that there will not be a top 5 player that comes out of this Lions offense. And I think the most likely defense to be defense number 1 next week is Detroit. Last year, their defense wasn't great, and that actually was pretty good for fantasy because it led to a lot of shootouts. But that's not the case this year. With Aiden Hutchinson being healthy, like these are some of the most elite defensive grades across the board that we have. They're healthy. Last year, they're doing where the Ravens are now, or they were the Ravens. Where the Ravens are now is what they were last year, where they had basically their starting lineup was on IR on defense. And Hutchinson is healthy, and he is such a big difference maker. I think his defense is going to eat this week. It's going to be tough for Browning. Give me Detroit defense as much as possible. Going to be hard to get to him at 3,500, but we will find ways to make that happen. All right, on to our last game of the main slate. Play your Lions, play your Lions, play your Lions. Now, here's another fun spot. You know what else we need to play? We need to play Charger wide receivers. Charger wide receivers. Washington, in coverage, I believe has the lowest coverage grade on the slate. They do, by a huge chunk. Pretty below average. I think they're about middle of the pack, actually, on the pass rush. Yeah, towards the top a little bit. Their pass rush is decent, but their coverage is horrific. So we will be attacking this Washington secondary like crazy. Super excited. Been on Herbert the last couple of weeks. It hasn't quite worked out. Been on the Chargers the last few weeks. Last week, there were 2 guys that came out of it. Hampton and QJ were solid top 5 guys. Needed both of them. But this week, I think this is the week that Herbert is top 3. Him, Goff, Dak. Those are my 3 smash plays at quarterback. Daniel Jones, I would also consider in there as well. But yeah, this is the week I think that Herbert really goes off. They do have a disadvantage in the pass rush. Their pass blocking has been pretty bad, and Joel will be out this week. But the disadvantages against the coverage is just so big that I don't think it's going to matter. I think it's going to be similar to like the Dallas versus Green Bay situation last week. Give me Chargers, give me Chargers. Let's look at this Washington defense. Bad at tackling. Run defense, they're actually pretty good. So I'm not going to be as heavy on Omari and Hampton this week. It's primarily going to be the receivers that I'm going to go after. And then this defense for the Chargers. Good run defense, below average in pass rush, but good in coverage. This game could be a shootout, especially if Jaden Daniels plays. I don't want anything to do with the run game in Washington. I'll mix in some Omari and Hampton, but he's priced a little bit higher this week. We'll look at that here in a second. But look at this advantage. This is where it's at. Chargers, receivers, and Herbert. Chargers, receivers, and Herbert. I will have a Chargers receiver in pretty much every single lineup. Yep. Going to be heavy on just a few offenses this week. If they hit, it's going to be a good week for your boy. Herbert at 6,100. More than fair. Give me Herbert. At least 15 lineups with Herbert. I might be even a little heavier than that on him. Marion Hampton at 6,500, a little bit harder to get to than he was last week at 5,900 with a much better matchup. But when the Chargers are going to move the ball as well as I believe they're likely going to be able to move the ball, you could have that scenario where Herbert throws for 350 yards but only throws for 1, maybe 2 touchdowns, and Hampton gets 2 goal line carries and Binks 2 TDs. Like that's definitely something that is likely to happen or is possible. So we'll have Hampton across the board. I'd say probably somewhere in the ballpark of 15% of my lineups. Not nearly as heavy as we were last week. We had him about 50% of our lineups. Obviously hit that pretty hard. We were above the market, and the market was at 40%. So he was chalk, but we went chalkier. We don't worry. Again, we talk about it week in and week out. It is important to have an understanding of where roster ownership percentages will be at, but it shouldn't really dictate how you build your lineups. The best way to win the Milly Maker is to have the lineup that has the players in it that scored the most points. DFS, or the DraftKings, does not pay out based on how much ownership you shared with people. Obviously, when somebody is more highly owned, you're going to be competing against more teams. You have to have more unique combinations outside of that one guy because there's going to be so many lineups that have that one guy in it if he goes off. But if he goes off and you don't have him, you have no shot. So people talk about like getting contrarian and fading chalk. I want to fade bad chalk, but I don't want to fade good chalk. So that last week is just another good example of that. It was like focus on building a lineup that's going to score the most points, and you'll probably make a lot more money than if you're focused on how to be contrarian. Their receivers are just, all of them are underpriced. QJ, rightfully so, is the highest priced wide receiver now. He should be that. And I think he will be my highest rostered receiver. But dude, give me McConkey. I know he hasn't done anything yet. He is an elite wide receiver. Like I don't remember his exact stats last year, but he had somewhere around 100 catches and over 1,000 yards last year. He had finished around wide receiver 12. Like, that's not just going away. He's a second-year player. It's not like he's washed. He is a good player. He has good connection with Herbert. That's not going away. I do think that there is a chance that QJ actually outscores McConkey for season-long stats, but McConkey's going to have plenty of boom weeks, and I think that this is a likely week for him to have a boom week. Keenan Allen, same thing. He has been much more solid and dependable so far in fantasy. 11, 7, 7, 10 on targets. Let's see where Ladd's been at. 6, 7, 5, 9. Yeah, Ladd's going to get targets. He had a couple drops last week, so this looks worse than what it was. But he's a reliable guy. They're going to go back to him. Don't fade Ladd because he's been bad so far. He's going to be fine. One of these guys will be in pretty much every single lineup. They are all underpriced. Someone in this group, I am very confident, is going to be a top 5 scorer this week, and there's a pretty good chance that 2 of them will be. I will be building plenty of Herbert single stacks, plenty of Herbert double stacks. I love this spot for the receivers. If Disley plays, I probably won't play any other tight ends. If he doesn't, Gadsden is interesting. He ran more routes than Conklin last week by about double. So we'll mix him in a little bit as a punt tight end. Now let's look at the Washington side. If Jaden Daniels plays, I'm going to want to build a few Jaden Daniels lineups. I probably won't game stack this too much. I'm pretty much just like in every lineup, I'm really going to try to have Chargers, Lions, Cowboys, and Colts in it. Like that, those are my core plays this week. So I'm not going to be doing a ton of game stacking. I'm pretty much just going to be targeting those offenses and building different combinations of those offenses across my lineups. But if Jaden Daniels is healthy, which his Q tag is gone, so it's looking like he will be playing this week, we'll definitely build 5 to 8 Jaden Daniels lineups. I'm not going to touch this running back room. It's just too much of a split. Like, guys could have decent weeks in here. Like, one of these guys I think is likely going to score 15 points this week. One of them will probably bank that, but that doesn't win us a Milly Maker. I don't think any of them are going to have 25 plus, so I'm out. Wide receiver, it's Debo and Debo only for me. Debo I will mix in across the board with Terry McLaurin likely being out again this week. It says he is trending again, trending in the right direction. So if he plays, definitely be interested in mixing him in across lineups. because I do think the only way that Washington's going to win this game is in a shootout. Like, I just don't see Washington's secondary stopping this offense. I really don't. I see the Chargers scoring 28, 35 points, somewhere in that ballpark. Like, I would be very surprised if they don't have 4 offensive touchdowns this week and 400 plus yards of offense. I really think the Chargers are just going to move the ball up and down the field. Jaden Daniels is very capable of keeping them in a shootout. If McLaurin is able to play, I will mix him in quite a bit. I'd mix in both Debo and McLaurin, as well as Ertz. Ertz I find very attractive at 3,800. So I will definitely mix those guys in with the thought of the potential of that game being a shootout, but I'm definitely going to be heavier on the Chargers side. Don't want either of these defenses. Yeah, so that's where we're at. Big focus this week, Chargers, Lions, Cowboys, Colts. Those are our offenses that are going to lead us to $1 million. There is a combination with a core of those players that is going to take us to that Milly Maker W. This is the week. I feel it. Week 5 is going to be the week we bank it. Appreciate y'all watching. Please leave your questions in the comments. If you're interested in getting this spreadsheet, I am happy to share it with you as long as you tell your friends about the channel, really trying to grow the channel. Not worried about making money yet. So I'm happy to share this spreadsheet that I build every week with you for free. So feel free to email me at millymakermaniac@gmail.com and request a spreadsheet, and I'm happy to send it to you. I appreciate y'all for tuning in. Please help spread the word about the channel. Good luck in week 5. Also, we will be having my player pool video that'll either be coming out tomorrow or Friday. I travel tomorrow, so it'll probably be Friday that I will get that out to you. But yeah, we will have the player pool video breaking down who I love at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defense, who my top plays, my core plays are. But until then, thanks for watching. Like I said, please leave your questions in the comments or shoot me an email at millymakermaniac@gmail.com, and have a great week 5. Thank you, my friends. Appreciate you watching.